On this edition of Southern Newsweek, school children find Easter eggs left behind by a mystery bunny, while Christians mark Easter by carrying a cross through the streets, and a refugee family loses everything in a house fire. Kia ora, I'm Melissa Barton. A capacity crowd of about 3,000 watched earth movers, dump trucks and wheel loaders give a full working display at the wheels at Wanaka over Easter weekend. The audience were just a small part of more than 20,000 visitors who attended the three-day event, which first began in 2019.
76 machines from across the country, with several even coming from the North Island, convened to move serious amounts of dirt at the Wheels at Wanaka earth-moving extravaganza. Dunedin contractor and event organiser Paul Clark says the earth-moving machines are divided into two classes, with ones before 1960s being cable-controlled and ones from the 60s and 70s being controlled with hydraulics.
These machines are vintage machines. They're retired machines, and it's not seen probably anywhere in the world, this collection of gear that is operating here today.
The two age classes demonstrated in 90-minute segments, and Clark says it's satisfying to show the public how these old machines built highways and dams across New Zealand.
Cost me a lot of money, but I get great satisfaction to see my machines out working and the guys driving them that love them, and the public viewing them at their potential.
Clark says he's pleased with the number of spectators that turned up for the event.
We're just astonished by the support we're getting from everyone that's here. The crowd's amazing.
A total of more than 20,000 people attended this year's Wheels at Wanaka event.
The mystery surrounding the Kakanui Easter Bunny lives on. Before Easter, Kakanui's school 45 pupils arrive ready to start their day, only to find the school grounds covered in chocolate treats for them to collect.
The days of the old school yard, these Kakanui school pupils will remember well. They ran throughout the North Otago school from the grass to the playground equipment, hunting for 620 mini eggs, 115 marshmallow eggs and 54 chocolate bunnies. It's the 6th year the chocolates have been hidden, and organisers say there's no indication who the culprit was. But some people claim to have seen a few pieces of white bunny fur. Kakanui School Principal Anne Rowan told the pupils they were incredibly special to have another visit from the Easter Bunny this year. The school's bell tolled and the pupils returned to class to divide the loot. In Kakanui, the South Today.
And others across the South chose to celebrate the Christian message this Easter. In Queenstown, more than 50 churchgoers shrugged off rain and wind to take part in a multi-denominational Easter walk of the cross.
Remembering the walk of Jesus carrying his cross to Golgotha almost 2,000 years ago, more than 50 members of various local churches shrugged off rain and wind to silently walk through Queenstown streets, reflecting on the life and message of Jesus Christ.
It is very important to witness our faith, especially at this time. If you notice, we walk very silently crossing the town, and people could see. There are a few people who made sign of the cross, even though some people maybe don't believe, but they could see that there's an activity, expressions of our faith in Jesus.
The Interdenominational Procession went from the Catholic St. Joseph's Church to the Anglican St. Peter's Church, stopping by at the Presbyterian St. Andrew's Church along the way, with a far bigger turnout than expected.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised. I expected maybe 10 to 15 people, but I was surprised that even children joined the walk.
Similar walks of the cross were held in other centres across the South. In Queenstown, the South Today.
This year's Easter races at Riverton saw thousands of people betting and partying in glorious sunshine over the two-day event. Club President Mike McCurdy says the racetrack is in good condition and the club intends to continue fighting off the looming threat of closure.
About 5,000 people enjoyed a day out at the annual Riverton races. It was a lucky day for jockey Rahul Bahari, who was thrown off his feisty mount Final Savings before race 5, only to get back on the horse again and win with an $8.60 payout. Club President Mike McCurdy says official reports declared the club track to be in top-notch condition.
The stewards say the track's in excellent order and fair to all the horses, so yeah, it's going very well. And we've had nothing but good things from what people think about our track.
The two-day Easter meeting is more than just thoroughbred horses thundering around the track, with lots of socialising and a range of entertainment for the children.
Well, to Southern, they're vital for the trainers and their staff. They employ a lot of people, and they're just they're part of the fabric of Southern. A lot of young people enjoy the day out, and it'd be a huge loss if they ever entered here.
The Riverton Club is still very much under the possibility of having its track closed down, but with recently refurbished jockeys' rooms and improved stabling areas, the intention for the club is to put its best foot forward.
We've had to make several submissions, as other clubs had to do, and that's probably going to be an ongoing thing. But our committee just take the view we're just going to keep on doing the best we can and not worry about whatever else is happening.
Day 2 of the annual race meeting was held on Easter Monday. In Riverton, the South Today.
A refugee family in Invercargill have been left homeless after their house was badly damaged by fire on Tuesday. Originally from Colombia, the family have lost all their personal possessions and are on the hunt for another house with a bond they can afford.
Nothing is salvageable from this fire-damaged home on Queen's Drive in Invercargill. The house was being rented by the Boutron family, who arrived in the country as Colombian refugees 3 years ago. An electrical fault in the kitchen stove sparked the fire on Tuesday morning. None of the 5 family members were at home when the house ignited, and a cat belonging to one of the daughters was found safe and sound later in the day. The family are now trying to find suitable accommodation, but it's proving difficult to find somewhere with affordable bond. In the meantime, the Boutrons are staying with family. Anyone wishing to help can contact Red Cross volunteer Joanne Usher at joanneusher@gmail.com. In Invercargill, the South Today.
Still to come up after the break on this edition of Southern Newsweek. Cars in Lawrence see how fast they can cover 400 metres, and knitted poppies are flying around the country, so catch this and more after the break. Welcome back. Tourism and travel operators are celebrating and are in planning mode following the announcement of a Trans-Tasman travel bubble. Dunedin travel agents are among those looking forward to a brighter future.
In about a fortnight, New Zealand will be open for business with Australia on a state-by-state basis.
If, however, a case was found that was not clearly linked to the border, and a state responded by a short lockdown to identify more information, we'd likely pause flights from that state in the same way we would stop travel into and out of a region in New Zealand if it were going into a short lockdown.
Ahead of yesterday's announcement of the bubble opening with Australia at 11:59 p.m. on April 18th, Air New Zealand announced a sharp increase in the number of Trans-Tasman flights beginning on April 19th. Air New Zealand's CEO says it's the best news he's heard in his time with the nation's carrier.
And I can tell you, I know it's going to mean a lot to all of us in Air New Zealand. Anyone who we've been able to bring back, those who have been just waiting and itching at this opportunity for us to be able to get out there and sell some more tickets, it's here.
Greg Foran says it's a shot in the arm for travel and tourism operators around the country. At Dunedin's Vincent George Travel, broker Roseanne Connolly-George doesn't expect a huge number of travellers rushing back and forth immediately, but says it's very welcome news.
We've been waiting for today ever since our first lockdown, I think. So whilst we've been repatriating a lot of people home and bringing them into New Zealand and out of New Zealand to go home, today marks a significant time for us to be able to open up communications with our clients and offer them a little bit more than we've been able to do previously.
Connolly-George says the announcement offers clarity for travellers and a boost for travel agents, but she believes many will be nervous.
I think there'll be some trepidation. People will still be a little concerned. People are going to want to know how safe is it to travel? What if something goes wrong? What if there is a community case in one of the states overseas in Australia? Where does that leave them? So I think us being able to reassure them that we are with them every step of the way is something that's going to be highly significant in today's announcement.
The Prime Minister says there are many safeguards in place. The Trans-Tasman travel bubble is set to open on April 19th, COVID-19 notwithstanding. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Dunedin man Mike Scolton retained his Lawrence quarter-mile drags title over Easter. Last year's event was cancelled due to the COVID-19 lockdown. Scolton replicated his winning sprint from 2 years ago, both of which were notched up in his Mitsubishi Evo.
Undergoing a sustained loss of traction, this year's quarter-mile drags near Lawrence saw a number of contestants heating up their tyres to make them softer and get a better grip on the road. After last year's event was cancelled due to the COVID-19 lockdown, Dunedin man Mike Scolton retained his Lawrence quarter-mile drags title, achieving a distance of about 400 metres in 9.99 seconds, nearly half a second quicker than his time from 2 years ago. Entrants included everything from big classic V8s to a small open-top 1100cc Triumph Special. In Balclutha, the South Today.
Memories came flooding back for a southern motoring enthusiast as she viewed the car in which the first meeting of the Cobra Rod and Custom Car Club was held in Gore. The 1956 Chevrolet Bel Air car, owned by her brother Graham Buchanan, I'll go back. That's a mouthful. There we go, take two. And memories came flooding back for a southern motoring enthusiast as she viewed the car in which the first meeting of the Cobra Rod and Custom Car Club was held in Gore. The 1956 Chevrolet Bel Air car, owned by her brother Graham Buchanan, was parked in Gore's former Centre Parks when the idea of a car club was first discussed 50 years ago.
Some cars will always be memorable, and seeing this 1956 Chevy Bel Air brought memories flooding back for a former passenger.
Absolutely awesome. I was only a teenager when I last saw this car and got to go in it a few times, not very often. You knew it was going to be really special if you did get to drive in it.
It's now owned by Anne and John Eisenhut of Tokoroa and featured at the Cobra Rod and Custom Car Club's 50th anniversary celebrations in Gore. John Eisenhut says they gladly accepted the invite to bring their pride and joy.
I was approached by one of the guys in the club and he said this was the first car in the club. It was actually the club rooms, the three guys would meet in it, and I went home and talked to my wife and she said, yep, let's go. So here we are.
His story about the car being the first club rooms was confirmed by one of the club's founding members, Peter Watson.
The first meetings were held in what used to be the old Gore Centre car parks. There'd be half a dozen guys get together and we'd meet in this car downtown.
On Saturday, the 86 cars registered for the event were on display at Gore's Trout Reserve, with a steady trickle of people coming to look over the vehicles. In Gore, the South Today.
Otago knitters and pilots joined forces to raise money for charity as part of a national relay through the skies. Knitted stars and poppies have been sold in Dunedin at a travel agency as part of the Poppy Flight charity relay.
Poppies are taking to the nation's skies as part of a fundraiser for the RSA, Starship and the New Zealand Warbirds Association. Dunedin travel agent Vincent George is pleased their office is hosting the Dunedin leg of the tour.
It's been quite a privilege. I know that the flight's been coming around all of New Zealand, and there's some remarkable charities that fundraising is being done for. And so our office in Dunedin is the spot where the artwork is coming once the pilot lands.
Waimuru pilot Hayden Williams says it's an honour for pilots like him to fly these treasures around, as it's a way of paying respect to airmen from many campaigns who never came home.
I think a lot of the guys in the air clubs have still got strong roots with, airmen from the past. Yeah. We've certainly got a lot of representation in all air clubs as far as our trophies and banners and bits and pieces, as far as our airmen from our local districts that went away and never came home. Yeah. And so, a lot of us, they're never far from our minds when we fly, so the least we can do is when we hear the opportunity to do something about it or represent them, we generally take it up.
Organisers say pilots change at each of the 30 airstrips around the country, where knitted poppies and stars are being collected for sale. Vincent George says local knitting groups have made poppies and stars for the fundraiser.
One lady I know called Wendy, her knitting groups made a significant amount of poppies and stars to be sold, and money of course gets raised and goes to these charities that Poppy Flight are arranging the donations for.
The flying relay is set to continue until Anzac Day. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Still to come after the break on this edition of Southern Newsweek. Over 10,000 cheese rolls are made for a good cause, and school pupils learn about climate change, so find out more after the break. Thanks for staying with us. A team of volunteers spent a day turning 500 loaves of bread and 100 kilos of cheese into more than 800 dozen cheese rolls. The project raised $13,000 towards the Otago Community Hospice.
Ashley Thompson's ambition to raise funds for the Otago Community Hospice has gone in leaps and bounds, with a busy crew in Dunedin's Kaikarai Rugby Club making more than 10,000 individual cheese rolls.
Everyone's running a bit like a production line. I'm at the other end just checking it off where the orders are going and making sure I'm packing everything up. It's probably the best place for me because I have the most knowledge about the intricacies of where it's all going.
The fundraiser is Thompson's chance to give back to the hospice after her mother died in its care last year.
My mum passed away in October, so we were in there for a week. During that time, the people that we saw were unbelievable, and when I found out that their street appeal got cancelled due to COVID, I sort of was spurred into action on just kind of getting it done for them as much as I could.
She'd originally hoped to sell just 100 dozen cheese rolls, but the project snowballed as people got on board to support a good cause.
Once I got to 800 dozen, I sort of put the brakes on, and it was a really hard thing to do actually, because it was a mix of feeling like, well, if I can get the orders, I need to take them, but also being realistic and make sure that I can actually deliver on the day. I've never done it before, so I wanted to make sure I was keeping it as realistic as possible.
In the end, the project has raised $13,000 in sales and donations, including a $5,000 gift from Oceana Gold. With Thompson confident the volunteers could create all the rolls from scratch in just one day.
It's going really good so far, but it's quite hard to know exactly how it's going because I've never done a cheese roll fundraiser before at all, and especially to this degree, but I think it's going well.
The event is just one of many groups across Otago making cheese rolls for charity this autumn. In Dunedin, the South Today.
One of the most highly anticipated stores in Queenstown is set to finally open its doors next week. Staff at Queenstown's Bunnings are putting the finishing touches on the $40 million premises on Frankton Flats after a protracted process spanning 3 years.
It's been a lengthy process getting this Bunnings store in Queenstown off the ground. But the new store's manager says he and the staff are pleased they're just about to open.
Listen, can't wait. absolutely can't wait.
The Aussie-based business first applied to Council for consent in April 2017, but Commissioners declined the application in March 2018. Bunnings appealed the decision to the Environment Court, which gave the company permission almost exactly 2 years ago, leading to the store now employing a mostly local workforce.
We've got just over 100 team members, and 30 of those have transferred down internally, and 70 locals have successfully secured a job here at Bunnings.
Bunnings Queenstown Complex Manager Liam Dawson is one of those who's moved to Queenstown, shifting down from Blenheim. Dawson says there's one facet of their store which really sets them apart.
We've gone very big on our trade offer, and we've got the largest trade yard in New Zealand. And we'll have one account manager coming out here and two high-up delivery trucks.
And despite the impacts of COVID, which last year saw 7 of its New Zealand outlets close, Bunnings pushed on with the build, beginning site clearance last May. The store is due to open next week. In Queenstown, the South Today.
A group of Wanaka locals is set to turn their leftover waste wood from building sites into lily pit libraries, pest control traps and more. And the community group have now been provided an ideal space to house their recycling workshop.
The sound of sewing, sawing and sanding could soon be coming out of a new space called the Wanaka Community Hub. Behind the idea is Ben Ackland of Wanaka.
I submitted for the council 10-year plan on waste and found that a group of people that were concerned about building waste, and we formed the group which was Better Building. And so that's Minnick Kelly and Vicky Spearing and a few others. And through that kind of process, I found the idea of a men's shed and looked into how we could use the retired folk around Wanaka to kind of pick up building materials from the building sites and then make them into things that the community needs, like lily put libraries and rodent traps and so on.
He then thought about expanding the idea, reaching out to the community to see if they would be interested.
Women came forward and adults came forward and said, what about us? So then it was like, well, if it's open to more people, more hours in the day, then we can utilise all the funding for different tools and then share it amongst the whole community.
He will be providing the building for a reduced rental.
This building I own, and so I took it to a committee of 10 people and we went through the pros and cons of fundraising for a building, waiting for council and the years that it might take to do that, against the process of me being a little bit generous as a landlord, signing up a lease that really benefits the trust, both in terms of annual reviews and a discounted rate. And we thought, well, if we can just get started, we can move to one of those other places at any time because the lease isn't going to hold us to it. And at least we can start to see really quickly what level of community engagement we get and what tools and equipment we have and how big a space it starts to take up. Because this may not be suitable. In a year's time we may find that it's too big or it's too small and we can move on. But if we spent a couple of years fundraising and getting a building built on a piece of council land, we would have no idea of how much space we needed and we might build the wrong thing. So this way we can kind of iterate really fast. And so a lot of the things I've talked about to heaps of people, there's so many different ideas from like bike maintenance, repair CAFs, just every idea is on the table. And then we'll see what sticks and what people really kind of gather around, and then those will become like the core elements going forward. So it's really up to the community to show us what they want, and then we can start to tailor it from there.
In Wanaka for the South Today.
The challenge of making climate change compelling was the focus of an experiment at Dunstan High School. The aim was to see if different ways of presenting information could be more effective than others.
A $20,000 community science participation project has high school pupils showing each other effective ways of communicating about climate change, all with a simple goal.
We want to see if we can get people to care about climate change, and we also want to see which presentation method is the most effective.
14-year-old Emily Atfield says in one room, Bodecker Scientific Director Greg Bodecker spoke with pupils using a PowerPoint presentation, while in an adjoining room, a 3D model with graphics overlaid shows the potential effects of climate change on the central Otago region. Dunstan High pupil Niall Asher is one of those behind the modelling and says their work easily shows what could happen.
Well, we wrote a program that has two screens, one of which is on a projector that shows all your data and you can show it on the map. The other one's a touchscreen that allows people to select what they want to see, so they can select types of data, year, and whether it's a good outcome or a bad outcome.
Data from as far back as the 1970s was used to help predict future scenarios up to the 2090s. Emily Atfield says seeing the high-tech graphics on the 3D model is a very clear way of seeing potential futures.
It's a model of the Central Otago area, and it projects, using mirrors, it projects scenarios over the next sort of 100 years with different emissions with different situations.
Options on the screens include annual maximum and minimum temperature increases, frost days, heavy snowfall days and snow-covered days. Niall says using a 3D model to project climate change data enables people to easily visualise how different climate scenarios look.
It's mostly about showing what could happen, because a lot of people don't seem quite aware of the dangers of climate change, and it seems that showing someone something in 3D where they can really look at it and see it is quite effective compared to just a map on a screen. Now when you can see a mountain you're familiar with and see how it's going to affect it, it's reliable.
The three-dimensional model was constructed using 3D printed tiles, which were then painted white for images to be projected onto. In Alexandra, the South Today.
And that wraps up this edition of Southern Newsweek. For the latest news from the Southern region, head online to odt.co.nz. Ka kite anō.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.